Have you ever done one of those online quizzes where it asks you a bunch of questions and then it tells you something about your personality? Well, a new study suggests that those are bad for democracy. And when I first saw that headline, I was like, come on, you're obviously exaggerating. But then I looked at their data and I was like, oh, yeah, this could be a big deal. Now, this isn't about those harmless quizzes that tell you things like which Hogwarts house you should be in based on your personality, because those don't really matter. This is about the quizzes that help you pick which political candidate is most aligned with your beliefs. And I've used these, like, if it's a big election about who's going to lead the country, I already know who I'm going to vote for, and I don't really trust these things. But if it's like school trustee or some small thing that I don't really know the candidates, I don't really know where they stand, I've used these online quizzes to help me figure out who to vote for, and I've trusted them. And this study shows why that's a really dumb idea. And it shows two things. One, it shows that the quizzes are biased and they might not give you the answer that does best align with what you've chosen. And then the second thing is that people really believe these things. When they're told by one of these online quizzes who they should vote for, they really believe it. It just came out in PLOS One. I have a link to the paper in the description, but let me just quickly go through the two main parts of the study so you can see for yourself just how compelling this is. In the first part, they looked at 15 online quizzes that help you pick which American political party you should be voting for. And of those, they found two that were especially egregious. So those are the two that they showed. And the first one has 4 bins. So you answer a whole bunch of questions. I think it's 15 questions. And it tells you whether you should be Green Party or if you should be Democrat or if you should be Republican or if you're a Libertarian. And what they did is they wrote computer code to take that quiz 300 times with just random answers every time. And they figured if you're just answering randomly, you should probably end up randomly assigned to each of those 4 bins. So it should be 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%. But what they found is that for that particular quiz, half the time it calls you a Democrat, and none of the time do you end up as Green Party. So no matter what your answers, at least of the 300 random guesses they did, no way you ended up in the Green Party. So obviously there's a bias to that survey. There's a second survey they use that shows you whether you lean left, lean right, or are in the middle. And that one, again, instead of being evenly distributed, came out as really heavily biased toward the right. And so if you're just answering randomly, it's going to tell you lean right when you're just answering randomly. You don't actually lean either way. So these two really just sort of prove that these things aren't always accurate. And even if they are balanced the way you would expect, it doesn't necessarily mean it's putting you in the right one based on your answers, because they're not transparent about how they assign weightings to the different things that you said in your answers. Your views on immigration might pull you one way, and your views on economics might pull you another way, and it's not clear which one is weighted heavily in these models. So you can't trust them, is the big thing that they showed in the first half. In the second half of the study, they showed that people do trust them. They believe them. So what they did for that is they showed that there are about 700 people in this second half of the study. They all looked at these 2 politicians that they didn't recognize. They were Australian politicians, and these were Americans taking the study. So they looked at these 2 politicians, they read a paragraph or 2 about each of them, and then they had to pick which one they thought they would vote for. And once they'd chosen, they did an online quiz to help them pick which one they should vote for. And it was rigged so that whatever they had answered initially, the online quiz was going to give them the opposite answer, just to see if they would switch. And people switched. People switched 77% of the time. 77% of the time, people trusted the online quiz more than they trusted their initial answer that they came up with based on what they'd read. I think that's really compelling. And in fact, they tried different weightings for, making more text or less text about the political candidates, making more questions or fewer questions for the survey. And if it was, if you had a lot of text to read through and it was really dense, and if you had a lot of questions on the survey so you felt like you were really able to trust it, people were swayed more than 90% of the time. It was 95% that got pulled. So you can rig these things so they seem really trustworthy, and people totally switch their vote depending on what these online surveys tell them. So anyway, really compelling. Shows you that you can't trust these things and that people do trust them. So next time you're trying to pick a political candidate, don't use these things. They're not good for you and you can't trust them. Anyway, I thought that was pretty useful. And this is just one of 5 science stories I found this week. The other 4 are in my weekly newsletter. That's the only way to get them. You can sign up at followthebatsignal.com.